Skull Viking fans and football, sports, hockey, basketball. We talk everything here on the Buck Stops here. My name is the Buckster, and we are back for episode 7 of season 2. I know I've taken a long hiatus, had a lot going on. I'm here to talk some college football playoffs, and I'm very excited about this. It's the first time I've ever done this. A lot of research went into this, so I'm going to have some fun with it. If you follow me at all, I have my blog that I do on WordPress. It's TBSH, and it's on WordPress. So I've kind of gone over some of this on WordPress. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give my top 12 teams. Why 12? Well, you'll see. I'm going to give the playoff scenarios, and really a lot of these teams control what's going to happen today or next week with how the playoffs pan out. But there are some scenarios where some teams like maybe Bama can get back in it. Not that I want to give anything away from my notes here. I want to jump right into what's going on. So as you see, I'm in a little bit different of a get-up today. I'm not in my Vikings purple. They played Thursday. They won. We're 9-2. We're rolling into the last half of the last quarter, fourth part of the season, and it looks like we may be able to get into the playoffs and have that shot at having home field advantage in the Super Bowl. It's unheard of. It's never happened. Let's see if Minnesota can do it. But let's just take 1 week at a time, and we'll talk more next week about the Minnesota Vikings. We're here to talk about the Georgia Bulldogs and the college football playoffs and how Georgia can lock themselves into the top 4 and make the playoffs. Do you think it might be time to go more teams? Could be. But right now, I think that we're just going to sit here and talk about how these 12 teams control their own destiny to get in. My top 12, and I'll have this posted later. It'll pop up on the screen, hopefully, if I can do this right after the live podcast, because, well, I'm really not that advanced yet, so I don't have somebody that can pop this up on my screen. But we're going to talk Oklahoma, number 1 right now in my college football rankings. They're 11-1. They had just the one loss. It was to Division Iowa State University. It really wasn't a good loss for them, but Iowa State was one of those teams that really kind of just haunted people in the Big 12 all year long. But they have 3 wins in the top 15, so I have them as my number 1. The reason Clemson isn't number 1 is because they went all the way up to Syracuse, New York, and played in the Carrier Dome and lost to the 3 or 4 win Syracuse Orangemen. That's where they're at now. They weren't at the time. They lost 27-24 to Syracuse in the Carrier Dome. That's a bad loss to a team that was ranked number 2 at the time. I've got Auburn as my number 3 team. Why and how's an 11-2 team that high? Or a 10-2 team at the moment. They beat number 1 Georgia. They beat number 1 Alabama, which was a great game yesterday, by the way. Y'all know that I'm always big on knocking Bama down off their pedestal. They didn't play anybody all year, and they almost lost to Mississippi State. They struggled a little bit with LSU for a while, and then Auburn beat them. Auburn also beat Georgia. So we've got a good showdown coming up. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Wisconsin, undefeated, and they're my number 4 because they're undefeated. Yes, they're undefeated in the Big Ten, and they haven't played a lot of people yet. The Big Ten's not a strong division past Penn State, Michigan State, and Ohio State and Michigan. So once you get past them, there's not a lot going on in the Big Ten. So I don't know if Wisconsin, if they're for real. We're going to find out in the Big Ten championship game. Rounding out the top 5, I got the Georgia Bulldogs. They control their own destiny. Bama's 6. They're pretty much out of the playoffs, but there is a scenario where Bama can still get in. And, it's tough, but I think Bama can get in. I don't think you're going to see two-loss teams make it into the playoff. So we'll discuss that. Miami is number 7. Ohio State number 8. Penn State University number 9. They're out. There's no way Penn State can get into the playoffs this year with 2 losses because they're not in a championship game. TCU is number 10. USC number 11. UCF, University of Central Florida, is number 12. Actually 11, I apologize. And number 12 would be, yes, I'm putting in the Memphis Tigers at number 12. They've only got one loss. That's to UCF, who they play in their championship game coming up this weekend. I don't think Memphis can make the playoffs, but UCF might be able to. And we're going to go deep into that. Man, this is really exciting because like 6 teams control their own destiny, okay? Oklahoma wins and they're in. They're the number 1 team in the country, I believe, as far as their record, who they've played. And if they win the Big 12 championship against TCU, they've got to be ranked 1 or 2. And the reason I say 1 or 2 is if Georgia beats Auburn, they probably will be number 1. Clemson could also sneak into that number 1. They're playing Miami. So Oklahoma wins, they're in. Clemson or Miami win that ACC championship game, and they're in. Georgia or Auburn win the SEC championship game, and they're in. And if Wisconsin beats Ohio State, I don't think you don't let an undefeated team get in. That being said, Oklahoma and Wisconsin win, you've got your 4 teams. It's cut, it's dry, it's done, it's over with. Nobody else has anything they can say to get in. Auburn, Georgia winners in, and the Miami, Clemson winner is in. There's 4 teams: Oklahoma, Miami or Clemson, Auburn or Georgia, and Wisconsin. But what happens if teams lose? This is where it gets confusing. Teams that need help and they need to win. TCU has to beat Oklahoma. They have to beat them sound, and then they're going to need some help. USC cannot get in. The way I'm looking at it, USC they might save face by beating Stanford because it's USC, but they really haven't had any big wins. They beat Stanford earlier in the year. It just is not and I think being that Bama is there. All right, let me back up a little bit. UCF, if they win and a couple things happen, they can make it in, and Bama still has a shot. Penn State, Memphis, and USC, I really think are done. I don't think any of those teams can get into the playoffs. Penn State's not in a championship game, so even though they're in my top 10, and they'll probably be in the top 10 in the polls, they're not getting in. Memphis is just here because I live near Memphis. It's the Memphis Tigers. I had to include them, give them a little love for the country to hear, okay? If they do beat UCF, they obviously will knock UCF out, and they'll get a really good bowl game. And hopefully, being the second highest scoring team in the country, Memphis, number 2 in the country in scoring, and the only team that's beaten them, UCF. That's amazing. You might say, well, they don't play anybody, but they've played some good games. They beat UCLA when they were ranked. So Memphis is good. Are they an elite team? Probably not, but they've come a long way. Enough about that. Let's get to the scenarios on how teams can get into the playoffs. I think Ohio State is out, even if they win, and here's why. Bama's 11-1, and it's Bama. That being said, Ohio State, even if they win, is going to probably end up like Penn State did last year, winning their conference and not making it into the college football playoffs. And that'd be okay by me because I'm a Georgia Bulldog and a Penn State fan, and Ohio State just can't get in. There's no way we want that, okay? TCU, they have the same situation as above, but here's the thing. If Georgia beats Auburn and TCU beats Oklahoma, I really think that's the big kicker to keep Bama out and let TCU sneak in with that, because you're not going to have two lost teams in the playoffs. There's no way with Bama sitting there on top all year long and only losing to Auburn. If Auburn loses, that opens a door for Bama to sneak back in the back door and be the other team. And then you'd have 2 teams from one conference in. But I think that's more logical than two lost teams making it. So that being said, Auburn needs to lose to Georgia for any 2 lost team to get in. So if Auburn loses, TCU has a chance. I don't think USC can really get in with 2 losses because they just, the Pac-12 isn't where it was a few years ago. They're not an elite conference this year. They bump each other off. They're subpar teams. I just don't feel they had a strong enough schedule to get in with 2 losses. Even if Auburn loses, I think Bama takes it. Now, if Auburn wins, all this is off the table. If Auburn wins, you're going to see Auburn in the playoffs. And if Wisconsin loses, then I think Bama gets in as well. Again, there's just so much to talk about here. It's like pulling in 80,000 different directions. So if Georgia beats Auburn, a 2-loss team could actually, jump in and catapult Bama. I don't believe there's going to be 2-loss teams to survive. An Auburn win, and then we could see Bama in there. Bama needs Auburn to win. Plain and simple. Auburn wins. I think that puts Auburn and Bama in if TCU beats Oklahoma, if Ohio State beats Wisconsin. Because again, if Oklahoma and Wisconsin win, they're in, and then the winner of the ACC and SEC championship are in. So that happens, and we're not talking any of this. Nobody has a shot, and nobody has a gripe. Georgia. So if Georgia wins and Ohio State wins, how will they rank? The Iowa loss is going to hurt them, and the Oklahoma loss isn't really that bad because Oklahoma is one of the top teams in the country. So it really depends on, how big of a win they have. The Big 12 game is the only the Big 10 games they lost were they beat Penn State and they beat Michigan State. I apologize for that. So if they beat Wisconsin, that's 3 top-ranked teams because Michigan was ranked at the time that Ohio State has beat, and it may get them in. But again, you're talking Bama, Ohio State. Who are people going to put in there? I mean, it's Bama, and I'm not a Bama fan, but it's Bama, and that's their chance to get in. I really think Ohio State's going to be looking on the outside. TCU lost to number 25 Iowa State and to Oklahoma. So they only have one top 25 win, and that was Oklahoma State. If they beat Oklahoma and Georgia beats Auburn, then TCU could be that other 2-loss team to get in. They're not as exciting as they have been in years past, and I think the committee is going to look at that and take that into account. USC, on their name alone, may have a shot, but they are the longest shot to get in. Here's your dark horse, the UCF Knights. If Central Florida can beat Memphis as easily as they did the first time they played, and Georgia loses, and Wisconsin loses, and Oklahoma loses, I know that's a lot to ask for, but you gotta take all this into account. Could the Knights get in? Could UCF get into the college football playoff? I mean, they'd be undefeated. How could you leave an undefeated team out? Why? There's no. So let's go to the scenarios. Oklahoma loses to TCU. Wisconsin loses to Ohio State. Auburn, 2-loss team, beats Georgia. Again, you can't have two loss teams in there. So now you have UCF and you have Bama. And people are going to say, well, it's Bama. It's Alabama. Let them in. But UCF's undefeated. Put them in. Make them a dark horse. Give them a shot. Because that's the only way to make this fair. And I know they have a committee, and the committee's supposed to take all sorts of things into account. And strength of schedule is one of them. But when I'm looking at these strength of schedules, it's showing Bama is the second toughest schedule. Bama played a bunch of cupcakes. They played Mississippi State and almost lost, and Mississippi State just quickly fell out of the rankings. They lost to Auburn, a 2-loss team. They struggled in the first half with LSU. They ended up beating them. They played, we could pull up Bama's schedule. I can't believe that they're telling me. Now, see, here's another strength of record. I see Clemson, Oklahoma, and Georgia as the top 3 strength. And Georgia had a tough schedule. It's really, I don't know where they're getting these strength of schedules from. Bama didn't play anybody all year long. They struggled with Mississippi State. They lost to an Auburn team, which right now, in my opinion, if you had to ask me who is the best college football team in the country, the way they've played the last 5 weeks, it's Auburn. They crushed Georgia. They beat Bama pretty handily. That defense is good. Their offense is good. As long as as long as Kerryon Johnson is healthy coming into this championship game, they could bowl through Georgia again. And even if you rank them number 4 in the playoffs, I think they're going to be the toughest team to beat right now. And I mean, I'm not a big Auburn fan. I'm a Georgia fan. So I don't know how this is all going to pan out. And again, it all depends on how everybody plays in their championship games. The committee could have the easiest job in the world next Tuesday, not the one coming up a week from, simply because Oklahoma wins, they're in. Wisconsin wins, they're in. And they just have to pick the winner of the Miami, Clemson, Georgia, Auburn games. Bam, rank them 1 through 4. There's your playoffs. Have a nice day. But I'm telling you, TCU and Ohio State could really throw some kinks into that whole thing. And if Auburn beats Georgia, it won't matter. Auburn wins, and any 2-loss team is out of it. And that opens the door for UCF and Bama. Comments, questions, man, send them my way. This is exciting. Heisman Trophy race coming down to the end. I think Saquon Barkley kind of drifted off at the end. And I think some of these championship games could still show some Heisman candidates. I don't think Jalen Hurts the guy. You go to Oklahoma and their quarterback, he could actually be the winner of the Heisman. Doesn't really turn out well for Oklahoma quarterbacks, does it? Let's ask Sam Bradford. I believe he's a Heisman winner. Maybe not. I have to go back and look. I don't think Bradford won the Heisman. He was the number 1 pick, but man, he is so injury prone. We're going to go into that another day, though, because again, that's great Viking football talk we're going to have. College football playoffs. Let me know who you guys think should be the top 4 going into this week. Let me know what you guys think about my scenarios. I'm telling you, you could see UCF in there with some help. I'm telling you, Bama can still make the college football playoffs. I thought they were out at first until I started breaking down these scenarios and wins and losses. There's just so much to take into account. But if these 6 teams control their destiny, Oklahoma, Wisconsin are the big ones. They got to both win. And then there's no confusion. So let's root Oklahoma, let's root Wisconsin, and let the other 4 teams beat each other up and find out what's going to happen. 1 week, we'll know who the top 4 teams are. Thank you for watching the Buckstocks here. I am the Buckster, Greg Buck Dietzen, and I really appreciate it if you would like this video. If you liked this video, please leave a like. If you're new, please subscribe to me today, and we'll see you next time. This is the Buckster on the Buck Stops Here.